Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to talk about React server-side rendering. In other words, it's called as SSR. If you are not familiar with what is SSR, it is basically a technique to allow to render the React component on the server side. This can have a lot of benefit, like it helps to improve the performance, improve SEO, and improve accessibility. So let's get dive in and see how we can implement React. Before we begin, let's make sure you have necessary prerequisites to follow along with this tutorial. You should have a basic understanding of React, Node.js, Webpack, including some concept like component, props, state management, NPM package management, and Webpack configuration. Additionally, we will be using Express as a server-side framework, so having some familiarity with it would be helpful. Let's create a new directory for our project and initialize it with npm. To create the directory, first I have navigated to the folder where I wanted to create that directory, and my folder path is C my work YouTube project. Here I need to create the directory, and I will name my directory as my SSR app. So once I run this command, a new folder will get created. Now let's navigate inside to the folder and then run npm init-y. So with that command, what it happened, this folder get a blank package.json which is required, so that we can add all the NuGet packages that we needed in order to run the React SSR application. So we have the folder, or you can say directory, is being created along with the package.json. It's time to install some dependencies that would require to run our React server-side rendering application. So to install the dependency, let's open this folder in the Visual Studio Code. To open this folder in the Visual Studio Code, from the command prompt, type command code space dot and our Visual Studio Code open. And this is the blank package.json in which we need to install some dependencies. And so far, the minimum dependency that we need to install is, let's open the terminal. We need Express, React, React DOM, Webpack, and Webpack CLI. So far, we only need this dependency as a bare minimum to start the React server-side rendering app. It will take few minutes. So let these dependencies install and then we can come back. As you see, all the dependencies are installed. So as a next step, first I will need to set up the server which is responsible for rendering my component on the server side. We are using Express to create our server. To create the Express server, let's first create the server.js file, and then we just need to write few lines of code. The first line is importing all the necessary module to spin up the Express server. Then the second line is basically creating an instance of an Express, and this is just to test the route. So when we browse localhost 3000 port, this is the route that get executed, and we can see the response is hello Express. And here we are defining the port in which this Express server will run. You can use any port. For now I'm using 3000, which is most commonly used port for Express. So if we need to run this, here I will type more server.js. We can see the Express server is running on port 3000, and if I go and browse localhost 3000, I can see my Express servers is up and running. Now the next step is to, using this server, we are going to render our React component. So let's go ahead and make some adjustment in the code. To render the React component server side, first I need to create the component, and to do that I will create a new folder at the root, and I will give the name as components. So all my React component will be exist inside this folder. The first component that I'm going to create is app.js, and I will use shortcuts to generate the boilerplate code for components. CC is to generate the class component, and I will give the name as app. So this is the component that I am going to render on the server side. Now we need to make some adjustment in this server.js so that we can able to render this app component on the server side. So let's start making changes in our server.js to render our app component. So the first change that we need to make is we need to import React module from React, and then we need to import render to string. And this render to string is responsible for converting the React component, in this case it is app.js, into an HTML string that can be sent as a response from the server. Now we need to import our app component. Then here where we are defining the route, we need to make change to get the HTML of an app component into a constant variable, and then a few lines of code to render this HTML as a response. So we have done all the necessary changes in our server.js to render the React component. There's one minor change, just to be consistent I can use the import express so that all the import module will follow the same syntax. Now the next step is to configure the Webpack to bundle our server-side code, and when we're done with the bundling, we can run this app and see how it works. To create the bundle of my server-side code, I am using Webpack configuration. To do the Webpack configuration, first I will create a file called webpack.config.js, and I will copy and paste the code that I have written previously for all the configuration steps. These are the configuration steps which I have used before, so I will copy and paste. This will cover in the future, like how to create the bundle of a client-side code. I will cover in the upcoming blog, but for now we are only creating the server-side bundles, so I'll keep the server entry only. Let's see the purpose of each line added in the webpack.config.js. So the first line, which is constant path equals to require path, this line imports the Node.js path module, which provide the utility for working with the files and directory. The second line, which is module.export, This line exports the configuration object as a module which can be used by Webpack to configure the build process. The third line, which is the target node, this set the target for the Webpack build to be the Node.js, indicating that the code will be executed in the Node.js environment. The entry node, this specifies the entry point for the server build, which is currently we set it as Server.js. So if we have the client build also, then we can have the another entry for the client. The output section, this configure the output for the Webpack build. It specifies the file of the output to be dynamically generated based on the entry point using the names placeholder. It also provides the output directory to be a build directory which is resolved relative to the current directory using the path.resolve. The next step is the module. This defines the module configuration for the Webpack, which specify how to handle different type of files during the build process. The next section is defining the rules. The rules are basically used for handling the different type of file. In summary, this configuration file set up the Webpack and a Babel to transpile the JavaScript file for a server-side rendering setup, with the output files being generated in a build directory. It also specifies the use of Babel loader to transpile the JavaScript file using the Babel preset env and preset react. The purpose of preset env for transpiling modern JavaScript feature to older version of JavaScript that are supported in Node.js, and the purpose of Babel preset react for transpiling the JSX syntax used in the React component. I am hoping that this detail give you the little bit understanding of how Webpack configuration work and the purpose of each line in this Webpack configuration file. Now let's move to the next step. One thing I wanted to mention here, we are using Babel loader and Babel preset env and Babel preset react. So we need to also install these dependencies in our project, and these are the dependencies only required as a dev dependency, as it does not required when we deploying the build into the different environment like staging, production and so on. So to install the dev dependency for these, I need to run this npm command along with the save dev. So these dependencies are only for the development environment. Now all my dependencies and configuration is being completed. It's time to build the Webpack config.js. To build the Webpack config.js, I just need to add one line of command in package.json. To add the build script in the package.json, I can go to the package.json, and under the script section, I can paste this. So what happened when you run this build script? When you run this build script with the specified Webpack configuration, it triggers the Webpack builder to process your project source code according to the configuration setting that we have defined in the webpack.config.js, and resulting in the final output that is ready to deploy to a production environment or a staging environment, wherever we wanted to deploy the build. Now let's run the build command and see the output. So to run the build command, npm so the command get executed successfully, and if you can see here, it also generated the output folder with the name of build, because this is the name that we have given here. Whatever the name that you have given here, it will generate the folder with that name. And if you see here, it also created the server.js, which we can execute to render our app component server side. So to run this server.js, type node then server.js. I can also create a script command and execute it from package.json. For that, I can simply go back to the package.json and give this script command name like start dev, and then now we have the script command also. So to run this script command, type npm start dev. Now we can see our server port is running. Our server is running on a port 3000, which we have added log here. So if I go to browser and type http localhost 3000, I can see the content that I have added under my app component.js. I can see it in the browser, and when I click view source, I can see the same HTML content that we see up in the browser in the view source as well. So that is what all server-side rendering. So when we say server-side rendering, it means the server generates the complete HTML content that include the initial rendered content, which is sent to the client. This allows the client to receive the fully rendered page from the server without having wait for JavaScript to load and execute. A quick follow-up between the server-side rendering and a client-side rendering. In a server-side rendering, when user open up a website and browser send a request to the server, server generates a rendered HTML file and fetches all the data needed. Browser rendered the website and download the JavaScript file. Browser executes the JavaScript file, app is ready to use, site is visible and can be interacted with. However, in client-side rendering, whenever user open up a website, browser send a request to the server, server sends an HTML file with the style and script to the browser. Browser downloads the linked JavaScript file, browser executes the downloaded JavaScript file, app fetches all the website data and data is ready to use, site is visible and can be interacted with. So you can clearly see in client-side rendering, user can see the final content once all the process has been executed. In case of the server-side rendering, user can start seeing the content comparatively early than the client side, because whenever browser send a request to the server, server will generate the HTML and send back to the browser. And because of that, server-side rendering give the better user experience, SEO friendliness and higher in performance comparatively to the client-side rendering. I hope that you like this video, and this video will help you to understand the concept of React server-side rendering versus client-side rendering, and this video will help you to create your first React server-side rendered component. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel and provide your feedback in the comment section. Thank you.